St. Paul talks about stewardship and doesn't use the word, but he's talking about work in two different ways. You know, there's that sentence in there, those that don't work don't eat. Okay, that's used oftentimes by politicians, totally ignorant. Okay, and just so you understand where I'm coming from, that's ignorance. Because Paul doesn't mean it that way. He's understanding that your stewardship as a follower of Jesus and a believer in God is very simply in two pieces. The first steward, I'm walking around, Adrian, is that bad? There? Oh, man. Okay. I don't know, I have to pace a little, I'm sorry. The first stewarding that is talked about, as Paul understands it, is the stewarding of your legitimate work. That is, that which you do or have done and have gotten paid, the way you have invested your time and gotten paid for your time and your talent and your energy. That is the work as we understand it. That may or may not be your vocation. It may be just a job that you have because you need it to have money to have a house, bed, food, clothes, and those kinds of things. And that is the first kind of work that Paul's talking about. The second piece of stewardship, as we understand it as Christians, is the stewardship of love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, strength, and mind, and your neighbor as yourself. So that would be your second style of stewardship, and you can do that kind of stewardship with or without paid work. And in either case, Paul was talking to a congregation in Thessalonica, and at that time, it's in Greece, there had been some earthquakes and some flooding, and there had been some civil wars, and those kinds of things, and the congregations there were just saying, you know, this is just getting old. It's just getting old. We're getting tired of caring, and every time we care, something else bad happens. How much can you care before you just can't care anymore? And so what happened, some of those folks in the congregation, and Adrian, I'm going to go over here now, I'm sorry. Some of those folks in that congregation in Thessalonica were quite literally starting to get so discouraged and so disgusted that they not only stopped doing their Christian care of family and friends and congregation, they also stopped working. They just got disgusted, discouraged, and depressed, period. And so they began to live in an understanding of what the early church and what I consider to be a life of sloth. And sloth is just not physical laziness, all right, the kind of thing where you make a promise you're going to clean up your dishes afterwards, and you leave them sitting there for about 2 days, and they get all hard and gooky because you just didn't feel like doing it, and you got lazy, and you just didn't give a hoot. Yeah, that. All right. So there were some folks that were just doing that stuff. They just gave it up, just didn't care. And that's one kind of sloth, the physical version of it. But the spiritual version of sloth is a malaise. It is a refusal to see grace in the barren places, as one monk has said. The refusal to see grace in barren places. And it's the neglect of duty in the physical sense of things, but in the spiritual sense, it's a refusal of joy. Okay, you got that? A refusal of joy. A refusal to see grace in barren places. Acedia and sloth. Same word, same understanding. The refusal to see grace in the barren places. Dantes Inferno, I must quote you Dantes Inferno, from one of the layers of hell, where those who have sloth and acedia live. They live in the mud that also covers them up. So they can talk, mostly bubbles, and they can see very vaguely. And they sing the same song over and over again. We were sad in the sweet air which the sun made cheerful, for within us was morose smoke. That's acedia. That's sloth. That is a style of living in which you don't give a damn. Sorry. And that is part of the dilemma that we have in our culture today, because people are becoming more and more divorced from the very structures and principalities and powers that we've helped to shape and create. We no longer have very much control over the kind of lives that we choose to live, or at least we think not, because of the strength and the power of social media and TV and politics and all of the other institutions which tend to overwhelm us and our thinking. Please understand, it overwhelms our thinking and brain power sometimes, but it does not overwhelm our lives. And that is what Paul is saying to that congregation in Thessalonica. There's no earthquake that need overwhelm you. There is no emperor that need overwhelm you. There is no discouragement that need overwhelm you and cause you to go into a state of acedia where you have nothing in yourself except morose smoke. The fact of the matter is that grace is present everywhere and every time, in every moment of your day and your life, and in the life of the people around you. And what Paul was talking about when he was saying, if you don't work, you're not going to eat, he wasn't talking about going out to your job, paying job. And by the way, Martin Luther, you need to understand where Martin Luther was coming from when he was thinking about work. He said, goods are not goods unless they can be shared. Okay, you get the play on words? Goods are not goods, good, unless they can be shared. And that was in the 1500s, around the time of the plagues and all of the wars in the Middle Ages. And the stewardships that Paul refers to really link together at the simple point where you have been given grace upon grace, love upon love, strength of spirit upon strength of spirit, in order to tikkun olam, repair the world. That is our singular job in this life as stewards of God's creation. Tikkun olam, repairing the world. That is the only thing that we gather for. To receive the graciousness of God, to recognize His presence in our lives daily, to know of it, that it will be there eternally, and to share it daily. That is all we have to offer, but it is enough to do that. Love the Lord with all your heart, soul, strength, and mind, and your neighbor as yourself. The people in Thessalonica, many of them gave that up. Just as we have many people in our culture who are giving that up. That is why we're starting to break down into small tribes with our factions. Our parties, our political parties, are no longer recognizable political parties because there's so many factions within that. And our country is breaking down. Well, what happened to the Rust Belt? I guess not so rusty anymore. I don't know. I live in Pennsylvania. I didn't know I lived in the Rust Belt. Or if I did know, I forgot. I got a phone call, I must tell you, from a pollster yesterday. And it was quite interesting. It was a post-election poll. And there was just an operator, you know, online. I'd like to ask you a few questions, sir, if I may, Mr. Hardiing. She knew my name, but I didn't know hers. So you know the first thing I did. What's your name? And I'll make one up for you. My name's Robin. Well, good, Robin. Well, how can I help you? Well, I'd like to ask you a few questions. Okay, that's fine, but then I'm also going to be asking you a few questions. Well, yeah, okay, now here's the deal. Now listen up. The reason you want to do that is you must pull back the curtain of anonymity, and you must pull back the curtain of lack of humanity, which is what social media and TV and polls do. Even in the elections, the people running for election are not addressing our positive humanity. They are addressing our fears. You understand? They're addressing your fear, not your hopes and dreams. First, we have to identify fear as the problem. Then we must identify the scapegoat. You always have to identify the scapegoat. I mean, look at Caesar Augustus and Pontius Pilate. Who was their scapegoat? Jesus. Duh. That's just what Jesus is telling the disciples when they're standing at the temple. They're going to be scapegoated at some point or other. So anyhow, she asked me, okay, are you a Republican or a Democrat? I say, I'm not telling you. Will you tell me who you voted for? No. I split my ticket. I always vote for the person I believe will do the best job in the circumstance. That's not an answer on my chart. I said, I know. Well, it is an honest answer. Well, I'm going to put down independent. Okay, that's fine. Do you believe in the Affordable Health Care Act? I said, yes, I believe that everybody should have affordable health care. How it happens is going to be something which will have to be worked out. Okay, I'm going to put down yes. And so we went along that way for a few minutes, and then I asked her, who do you work for? I can't tell you. I said, well, I was just honorable. This is what I said. Hear me. You understand in this little thing, we're actually getting to know each other a little bit in the conversation, right? Okay, this is where you want to be all the time. You always want to get to know the people you're talking to, whatever the circumstance. Well, I told you, you know who I work for. You know my occupation. You know I'm independent. You know pretty much about me. So who do you work for? I work for a polling company. I said, what's the name of the company? I shouldn't tell you. Okay, you see how the dynamic goes? Okay, we've been negotiating. I shouldn't. But she did. She did. Shaw, something or other pollsters, and I haven't looked them up yet. And then I said, now who hired you? And she told me an honest thing. I don't know. Who hired us? I just asked the questions. I thought that was pretty cool. So we went from a really stupid sort of thingy there, which would have left me totally aggravated, to having a little bit of a window on a world different than the one that I knew. And she also got a window on an old white guy, which is why she called. Okay, you know that, okay? On an old white guy who was still interested in life and living. And so we both have that sort of, Then we said goodbye very cordially. Now this is the kind of thing that you and I have been given, the gift of both grace, the gift of loving the world, the gift of repairing the world. That's partly what I was trying to do, by the way. Getting this young person to repair her life to the point where I was neither a Republican nor a Democrat, nor an enemy nor a friend, but a person, a man who had a care for the world and a care for the country, See, that's where you and I need to be at all times. And that was not happening in Thessalonica when Paul wrote his letter, which is why he said to the people there, if you don't work, you don't eat. Basically, he was insulting them. You're taking up space on the planet here and calling yourself a follower of Jesus, and you ain't doing squat. You're being incredibly useless. And you've got this giftedness of the gospel and the good news, the giftedness of energy and strength and hope and future, and you are doing absolutely nothing with it because you are acidic. You have a morose smoke. And you've been given the gift to smell the sweet air, which the sun has made cheerful. And that, my colleagues and friends, is our stewardship.